well, quite a few Jews. And now their numbers are down to about 10%. He hasn't spoken a word about that. It is widely believed that Obama helped Mubarak get deposed, opening the way for the Muslim Brotherhood, thereby intensifying attacks on the Copts. He gave military support to the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt and cut back on it when the Muslim Brotherhood was out of power. Obama apparently has money for Obamacare and amnesty for illegals, but not for the military. Makes you think. Obama has been accused of crimes against humanity by Egyptian lawyers. So I just want to read you one part of this article by Raymond Ibrahim, which occurs in the Christian Broadcast Network, if you want to look it up later. A group of Egyptian lawyers has submitted a complaint charging U.S. President Barack Hussein Obama with crimes against humanity at the International Criminal Court. He was an accessory to the Muslim Brotherhood, according to them. It's pretty serious, especially coming from lawyers in the country that was the homeland of the Muslim Brotherhood, and I'll be talking more about that. Congresswoman Michelle Bachmann stated that Muslim Brotherhood elements have infiltrated the U.S. government, and for that she was treated with absolute scorn. There was denial. It's the sort of thing that people didn't want to hear, just too scary, too unpleasant, so they turned their back on it. However, corroboration of her allegations came in December 2012 from Egypt's Rose El Yusuf magazine, which asserted, and this is really important, that 6 highly placed Muslim Brotherhood infiltrators within the Obama administration had transformed the United States from a position hostile to Islamic groups and organizations in the world to the largest and most important supporter of the Muslim Brotherhood. I'm going to repeat that Obama has transformed the United States from a position hostile to Islamic groups and organizations in the world to the largest and most important supporter of the Muslim Brotherhood. And one of the worst of these infiltrators is somebody called Mohammed El-Biari, who was a member of the Department of Homeland Security's Advisory Council. El-Biari fervently endorses the teachings of Egyptian writer Sayyid Qutb, who is a proponent of the Muslim Brotherhood. And as you know, the Muslim Brotherhood was the source of teachings that led to Al-Qaeda and Osama bin Laden, and of course it's got parallels with what's happening in Asia, Maududi, people like him. So the FBI lets itself be advised by advisory groups from the Muslim Brotherhood on how to think about terror. Does that make any sense? That's like the wolf guarding and guiding the sheep. No, the wolf is going to eat the sheep, and that's what's happening. Under the tutelage of the Muslim Brotherhood, we're being taught not to think about Islamic fundamentalism, the Muslim Brotherhood, and terror. We're being taught not to think about what's happening in Bangladesh. It's just not a problem. And the news media is cooperating with that. It doesn't exist for them as a real issue. So, this denial of the problem sets the stage for massive danger. Because of political correctness, we're not allowed to identify what's happening. Nidal Hassan shot dead 13 of his fellow soldiers. They should have been fellow soldiers, but he was just waiting for an opportunity to commit jihad on them. He did that at a military base. But it's not called jihad, it's called workplace violence. Everything to avoid dealing with jihad. If one can't even think about a problem, one certainly can't take effective action against it. So as mentioned a moment ago, El-Biari, who advises the Department of Homeland Security, endorses the teachings of Sayyid Qutb. So just who is Sayyid Qutb? He's very important in the development of the Islamic terrorist revolution, building on the ideas of the Muslim Brotherhood, which was started in Egypt in 1928, just as the Ottoman Caliphate was crumbling. It was a reaction to the loss of power of the Ottoman Caliphate and an attempt to regain it. There are two main ways that the Muslim Brotherhood operates in the world. One way is quietly through deception, fake integration into civilized society, wearing phony smiles and suits and ties, and hoping to slowly worm their way into the society in Europe and destroy them. The other way is more impatient with that slow route, and they resort to violence. That's Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda and all the other offshoots, and you know them very well, what's happening in Bangladesh. This is the more direct way. They say, we're not going to fake our way into power, we're just going to take it, and we're going to kill to get it. This guy Qutb declared, there's only one place on earth which can be called the home of Islam, that's Dar al-Islam, and it is that place where the Islamic State is established and the Sharia is the authority and God's limits are observed. A Muslim can only have two possible relations with Dar al-Harb, peace, with the house of war. In other words, if you're not a Muslim, you're in the house of war, you need to be conquered for your own good. So back to the theme of how the Muslim Brotherhood has weakened the United States and made it not a very reliable source of help for you. And I want to tell you how the Muslim Brotherhood works in the US with its plan to colonize this country. That's their word. The scope of the Brotherhood's vision for the United States was spelled out in a 1991 document called the Explanatory Memorandum. We gave it that name. In that memo, which federal prosecutors introduced as evidence in 2 trials, Brotherhood leaders said they planned to create an Islamic State in the United States, and that their stated goal was a kind of, now I'm quoting, a grand jihad in eliminating and destroying the Western civilization from within and sabotaging its miserable house by their hands and the hands of the believers so that it's eliminated and God's religion is made victorious over all other religions. And having established that, many other small groups formed to express this. They are ISNA, the Islamic Society of North America, the NSA, the Muslim Students Association, NAIT, North American Islamic Trust, CARE, Council on American Islamic Relations, many, many other small groups, fronting themselves as groups working on civil projects, but actually they've got the Muslim Brotherhood agenda. This is all documented. Go to Google and check it out. The State Department has been infiltrated too, and it has an intellectual orientation disposed not to acknowledge the depth of the problem of militant Islam. And here's how it happened. Saudis have been buying influence in US policies since the 1970s. It's a long time ago when we began giving them lots of money for their oil. So the Saudis bought shares at universities and influenced the media, the writing of educational materials, including textbooks for children, and of course the government. The Ivy League schools, considered the top universities, are targeted by the Muslim Brotherhood. And since these graduates considered the cream of the crop, they go into the top levels of institutions, including the CIA, the FBI, think tanks, and NGOs. They go in already brainwashed to ignore and deny jihad. And so, of course, it became acceptable that Hillary Clinton's aide, Huma Abedin, has 3 close family members highly placed in the Muslim Brotherhood. They are her mother, father, and brother. Is this interesting or what? Yeah? All right. The Muslim Brotherhood established Wahhabism here and throughout the world in order to shape how people think. Iran has also influenced peddling groups here, disguised as other things, of course. Now we cannot criticize Islam without being dismissed as Islamophobes. And that's because the mainstream media plays right along with the Muslim Brotherhood agenda and even downplays the obvious signs of Islamic violence. This is one of the reasons why the persecution of minorities in Bangladesh is largely unknown to the American public. So let me make that even clearer, that the people coming out of the Ivy League schools, they consider themselves top flight. They have already been brainwashed by Wahhabist money and teaching to make friends with jihad and Sharia, to make friends with an Islamist agenda. So they're not going to write about your plight. It's going to have to come from the alternate press, people like me, and yet we get dismissed, ignored, and called Islamophobes. Now as for the UN, have they ever intervened to protect Bangladesh minorities? You know that the Organization of Islamic Cooperation passes resolutions to criminalize any criticism of Islam. That removes the teeth from awareness about reality and any kind of intellectual defense against oppression. So how much help can they give you? And the Obama administration has been working together with the OIC to effectively criminalize any criticism of Islam. That's making a mockery of the First Amendment. Plus, the UN accepts dictatorships as having equal rights. Doesn't that pull down the whole organization? And right now, the Saudis are about to hold a seat on the UN Security Council. Don't forget, it's the Saudis who sent Wahhabist teaching everywhere, inflaming Muslims. Before they did that, the Muslim world was very beaten down. They were not much of a threat. Don't forget, the Ottoman Caliphate had been crushed. Yet, once Wahhabist influence came, fueled by our money, they were able to revert to their old ways. Something I heard in the film before, that Islam has always been peaceful except for recently. No, I'm sorry, that's just not true. If you look at history, they were violent from the beginning. They took over land by force. That's how come they took India and Bangladesh, isn't it? They conquered you by the sword. So they were beaten for a while, and then they got wealthy from us. That can be reversed. So now we get to what to do. I want to say that it can be hard to acknowledge really frightening realities, but it must be done. It can be hard to view the Muslims next door with both trust and distrust. You know, we all know some really nice Muslims, right? I do too. In fact, some of my colleagues in my counter-jihad activist work are Muslims, and they're good people, because they understand what jihad is and they don't want it. But don't forget too that Muslims have a holy book that tells them to be warriors and dominate other people. They're under peer pressure to go with that. Even if they want to be nice, they have to resist that peer pressure. That makes them maybe a little unreliable. And so the job for people like us, who could be their victims, is to hold a certain amount of both trust and distrust. That's how it seems to me. I must say that when I view what's happening to the Bangladeshis, it just really puts me back with my memories of what happened to my Jewish people during the build-up to the Holocaust. There were many, many signs that something was terribly wrong. But you know what happened with Jewish leaders? They told their people, don't worry, it's okay, no problem. They were not honest. Some of them were genuinely confused, others were bought off. I'm saying, get in touch with your gut. And listen to what your gut tells you got to do. Ideally, the West would adopt very stringent measures to deal with the Muslims in our different bodies or different national bodies. We would have very strict immigration requirements. We would deport anybody who looks a little bit suspicious. We would protect ourselves. But that's not happening, and we have to get real about that. So therefore, as I said at the beginning, appealing to our governments, whether it's the United States government, the UN, or in your case, I would say appealing to Bangladesh, is going to be of limited effectiveness, but something else can be done.